They say my profession is lowly. My mother considers me a mere seamstress. She and my precious little sister Lexi think they can force me to work for free, draining my labor for their vain dreams under the spotlight. They want the most magnificent evening gown for Lexi to shine at the Miss State pageant. Fine, I'll make her shine. Lexi is about to have a performance where she literally unleashes herself in a way television history will never forget. The bell above my studio door chimed at exactly 2 hours in the afternoon. I didn't need to look up from the silk chiffon I was hand finishing to know who it was. The overpowering cloud of Chanel No. 5, the kind that screams, "I'm trying too hard," announced my mother's arrival before her heels clicked across my worn hardwood floor. "Harper, darling." Deborah's voice dripped with that particular honey-coated tone she reserved for when she wanted something. "We're here." I set down my needle, carefully securing the delicate fabric, and looked up. There they stood, my mother, Deborah Vance, in her crisp white blazer and designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and my sister Lexi, 23 years old and stunning in that effortless way that comes from a lifetime of being told you're beautiful. Lexi wore athleisure like it was haute couture, her honey blonde hair cascading in perfect waves that she definitely hadn't earned through good hair care, just good jeans and expensive salon visits. They surveyed my tiny studio with barely concealed disdain. I watched Lexi's nose wrinkle slightly as she took in the cramped space. Bolts of fabric, leaning against every available wall, my ancient sewing machine that wheezed but still worked, the dress forms that had seen better decades, and the single window that let in just enough natural light to make the whole place feel more shabby than shabby chic. "How are you, sweetie?" Mom asked, though her eyes were already scanning my work table, clearly searching for a clear spot to set down whatever she'd brought. "Busy," I replied, gesturing to the 3 dresses in various stages of completion hanging near my workspace. "I have Mrs. Patterson's daughter's prom dress, due Friday, a bridesmaid alteration set for the weekend." "And that's wonderful that you're keeping busy," Mom interrupted smoothly, sliding an open fashion magazine onto the only clear corner of my work table. Her crimson manicured finger, fresh from the salon, no doubt, pointed directly at the cover. "But look at this, sweetie. Look at the sophistication of this piece." I leaned forward despite myself. The gown on the cover was breathtaking, a Valentino masterpiece, emerald green with intricate beadwork that probably took a team of artisans hundreds of hours to complete. The bodice was structured perfection, and the skirt flowed like water frozen mid-cascade. It was the kind of dress that graced red carpets and museum exhibitions. "This is exactly the level Lexi deserves," Mom continued, her voice taking on that familiar, controlling lilt that always made my stomach knot. "I don't want you to copy it exactly. That would be tacky. I just want Lexi's dress to be as grand and magnificent as this, if not more so. Emerald green, of course, for the Miss State pageant next month." She paused, letting the weight of her expectations settle over me like a heavy blanket. "And you will put your all into making this for her as a gift for entering the competition, okay? Your sister needs to be the most outstanding one there." A gift? Of course it would be a gift, not a commission, not a paid project. A gift, as if my time, my skill, and my materials were just family favors to be dispensed at will. "Mom, I started, but Lexi cut me off with a dramatic sigh. "Oh, come on, Harper." She perched on the edge of my work table, right next to Mrs. Patterson's delicate silk, making me wince. "You can't seriously be thinking of saying no." "I have 3 paying clients," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice level. "People who have already put down deposits and are counting on me too." "How are those rags you sew for common customers more important than my future?" Lexi's perfectly glossed lips formed a pretty pout that had probably won her a dozen pageant crowns. "You should feel honored to custom make a dress for the future Miss State. I'll advertise for you when I get there. Think of the exposure." The word rags hit me like a slap. I felt something crack inside my chest, a hairline fracture in whatever was left of my tolerance, but worse than Lexi's dismissiveness was the way that sentence, that specific, entitled, cruel sentence, pulled me backward through time like I was caught in a riptide. Suddenly, I wasn't 30 years old, standing in my cramped studio. I was 18, standing in front of the Bank of America on a sweltering August morning, holding a printed statement in hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Account balance, $0. The college fund my grandmother had set up for me, $50,000 carefully saved and invested over years, meant specifically for my education, had been completely emptied. Every single cent gone. I'd been so excited that morning. I'd already been accepted to Parsons School of Design in New York. I'd spent months preparing my portfolio, working part-time at a dry cleaner to save extra money, dreaming of the life I'd build. My grandmother had made me promise before she passed that I would use that money to pursue my passion. "You have a gift, Harper," she'd told me, her wrinkled hands holding mine. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." But my mother was listed as a co-signer on the account, a formality I'd thought a safety measure. When I'd confronted her, Deborah had been in the kitchen drinking iced tea and looking through a catalog of children's pageant costumes. Lexi, 12 years old at the time, had been practicing her walk in the living room, her little feet in kitten heels clicking across the floor. "Oh, honey, sit down," Mom had said, her voice so calm, so reasonable. "I can explain everything. You know your sister has a real shot at the regional title this year. We needed a new car. The old one was on its last legs. And how else was I supposed to drive Lexi to all her competitions? And the entry fees, the coaching, the outfits, these things add up." "But that was my college fund," I'd whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Grandma left that for me, for school. And I'm your mother. I know what's best for this family." She'd reached across the table, taking my hand in hers with that same tender touch that always made me doubt my own anger. "Harper, sweetheart, you're so talented. You don't need some fancy, expensive school in New York to prove that. The design industry is brutal. Do you know how many people graduate and never work a day in their field? I'm protecting you from wasting years of your life and ending up disappointed. But I wanted to listen to me." Her voice had gone soft, almost pleading. "Lexi has something special, real star quality. If we invest in her now, if she wins the titles she's capable of winning, our whole family's future changes. You'll be the sister of Miss State, maybe even Miss America one day. Doesn't that sound better than struggling in some overpriced New York apartment competing with thousands of other designers?" She'd squeezed my hand. "You're the smart one, Harper. I need you to support your sister. That's what family does. We lift each other up. And think of it this way. When Lexi succeeds, we all succeed. You'll benefit from her fame too." I'd been 18. I'd wanted so desperately to believe that my mother loved me, that she had my best interests at heart, that this sacrifice would somehow be worth it. So I'd swallowed my dreams. I'd enrolled in community college instead, taking basic design courses while working full-time. I'd taught myself advanced techniques through library books and online tutorials. I'd built my client base one bridesmaid dress and one alteration at a time, working out of a spare bedroom, then a shared studio space, and finally barely affording this cramped, poorly lit room I currently called my business. And Lexi, she'd won her regional title that year, and the next, and the next. The trophies lined the shelves in Mom's house like a shrine, but Miss State had always eluded her. She'd placed second twice, third once, close, but never quite there. Now here we were, 11 years later. I was 30, supposed to be established, supposed to be stable. Instead, I was drowning in credit card debt, behind on my studio rent, and watching younger, better-connected designers pass me by because I'd never had the education or the network that Parsons would have given me. And my mother and sister stood in my studio demanding another gift, another sacrifice, another piece of my soul offered up on the altar of Lexi's ambitions. "Harper." Mom's voice snapped me back to the present. She was looking at me with concern now, her head tilted in that way that made her seem so caring. "Are you okay, sweetie? You look pale." I realized I'd been staring at the magazine for too long, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. My voice came out rough. I cleared my throat. "I really don't have time. The pageant is in a month, and a dress like this would take, You'll make time." Lexi's voice had gone cold, her pageant smile vanishing. She stood up from the work table, crossing her arms. "I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. I'm your sister. This is important to me. Your paying clients are important too," I said weakly, hating how defensive I sounded. "Those people can wait or go somewhere else." Lexi flipped her hair over her shoulder. "If you don't finish the dress for me, don't bother being my sister anymore." The words landed like stones. I felt my breath catch. "Lexi." Mom's voice held a gentle reproach, but there was something calculated in her expression. She turned to me, and suddenly her eyes were shining with unshed tears, a trick she'd perfected over the years. "Don't be angry with her, Harper. She's just worried. This competition means everything to her. She's been preparing for months." Mom crossed the small space and took both my hands in hers. Her skin was soft, moisturized, warm. Her grip was tender. "You will finish the dress on time, right?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, intimate, like we were sharing a secret. "I chose you to design the dress for her because I trust your skills. You're so talented, sweetheart." There it was. The look, the tone, the particular combination of maternal affection and expectation that had been manipulating me for over a decade. My mother had never yelled at me, never called me names, never been overtly cruel. She just wrapped her demands in so much love and sweetness that refusing felt like betrayal. And despite everything, despite the stolen college fund, despite 11 years of watching my dreams shrink while Lexi's expanded, despite knowing with absolute certainty that this was wrong, I felt myself weakening because deep down, in a place I hated to acknowledge, I still wanted her approval. I still wanted to believe that maybe this time, if I just did this one more thing, she'd really see me, really value me, really love me the way she so obviously loved Lexi. I swallowed hard. "I need to finish the orders for my current clients first." "Of course." Mom's face lit up like I'd just handed her the moon. "Oh, that's my responsible girl? How long do you need?" 2 days, I heard myself say. "Come back in 2 days. I'll take Lexi's measurements then and we can discuss the design details." "Perfect." Lexi's smile returned, bright and triumphant. "See, I knew you'd come through. You always do." They left in a cloud of perfume and satisfied chatter, already discussing hair and makeup plans. The bell chimed as the door closed behind them, and suddenly, my studio felt even smaller than before, the walls pressing in like I was being buried alive. I sank into my desk chair and stared at the magazine they'd left behind. The Valentino gown stared back at me, beautiful and impossible. My phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Patterson, just checking in, so excited to see the dress on Friday. I looked at the half-finished prom dress hanging near my machine, the bridesmaid alterations waiting in garment bags, the dinner dress I'd promised to a regular client for next week, and I resolved to finish every single stitch within the next 48 hours. I would sacrifice my sleep to clear my schedule for Lexi, but I refused to let my paying clients suffer just because my family had come first. Again, always. 2 days felt like 2 minutes. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, finishing Mrs. Patterson's daughter's prom dress at 3:00 in the morning, subsisting on cold coffee and the kind of determination that comes from pure spite. The bridesmaid alterations were done. The dinner dress was hemmed. Every paying client had their order ready or nearly complete. I told myself it was professionalism. Really, it was the last shred of dignity I was clinging to. If I was going to sacrifice my time and energy for free, at least I wouldn't fail my actual clients in the process. When the bell chimed at exactly 2:00 on Thursday afternoon, I was ready, sort of. I'd cleared my main work table, set out my measuring tape, and even made a pot of decent coffee, though I doubted my mother and sister would touch it. "Harper," Mom sailed in, wearing a different designer outfit this time, a flowing floral blouse. Lexi followed, glued to her phone, thumbs flying across the screen. "Hey," I said, gesturing to the cleared table. "Ready when you are." Lexi finally looked up from her phone, glancing around the studio with fresh disdain. It's so cramped in here and it smells like old fabric or something." "It smells like work," I replied flatly. "Should we get started with measurements?" "Yes, let's." Mom clapped her hands together. "Lexi, honey, stand over here. Harper, you'll need to get every measurement perfect. This dress has to fit like it was painted on." Lexi stood like a mannequin, occasionally checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Mom hovered, offering commentary that ranged from obvious to irritating. "Make sure the waist is cinched tight, really tight. The neckline should be low but tasteful, and the back, the back needs to be dramatic. Everyone remembers a dramatic back. I wrote everything down in my notebook, the same leather-bound one I'd been using since high school. It was battered now, filled with sketches and measurements and notes from hundreds of clients over the years, a habit of meticulous documentation that had served me well. I need to grab another notebook from my car, I said, setting down my pen. I left my design notebook out there this morning. I'll just be a minute. Sure, Mom said, already pulling up photos on her phone to show Lexi. We'll be here. I headed out the door and down the narrow staircase to the street where I'd parked. The afternoon sun was bright, almost aggressive. I found my notebook wedged between the passenger seat and the center console, grabbed it, and headed back up. The studio door was slightly ajar. I'd left it that way for the breeze. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard Lexi's voice clear as crystal and absolutely dripping with disdain. I can't stand it. Her tone was petulant, whiny. Just because you spent all the money prepared for this pageant on filler injections, now I don't have enough money to hire a famous designer and have to haul up in this tiny, pathetic studio. I froze, one hand on the doorframe. Don't worry, Mom's voice replied, and something in her tone made my blood run cold. It was sweet. Oh, so sweet, but with an edge underneath that I'd never heard before. We'll say it's a design by an anonymous French designer. No one will know it was sewn by that failure. Failure? The word hit me like a physical blow. I have to look beautiful for the interviews too, Mom continued. If you're the beauty queen, I'll be appearing in the same frame. After all, those fillers were an investment in both our futures. Lexi laughed, high and cruel. Can you imagine if people knew Harper made this? It would be so embarrassing. She's so basic, so ordinary. Well, she has her uses, Mom said. She's always been eager to please. That's why I raised her that way. Someone has to be the worker bee while you're the queen, darling. I stood at the threshold, notebook clutched in my hand, and felt something inside me shatter completely. Not crack, but shatter like a window struck by a stone, spiderwebbing into 1,000 irreparable pieces. 11 years of swallowing my resentment, of telling myself that family came first, that my mother loved me in her own way, that my sacrifices mattered. 11 years of believing that if I just tried hard enough, gave enough, worked enough, I'd earn the same affection she showered on Lexi, but I'd never had it. I'd never even been close. I was useful. That's all I'd ever been. A tool, a resource to be exploited, a failure who could at least sew. Something shifted inside me, something fundamental and irreversible. It felt like waking up from a dream, or maybe like surfacing from underwater after being held down too long. Clarity, cold and sharp as a blade. My sacrifice was not a duty, it was stupidity. And I was done being stupid. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and forced my face into a neutral expression. Then I pushed the door open a little wider, making sure it creaked, and walked in with my eyes on my notebook like I'd been reading it the whole time. Found it, I said brightly. Sorry about that. I'm so scattered lately. Lexi and Mom had jumped apart slightly, their expressions shifting with practiced ease into something natural and warm. If I hadn't heard what I just heard, I might have believed they'd been discussing nail polish colors or something equally benign. No problem, sweetie, Mom said, her smile perfect. We were just talking about how excited we are to see what you create. Absolutely, Lexi chimed in. I know you're going to make me something amazing. I smiled back. It felt like my face might crack from the effort. I'll do my best. We spent another 30 minutes going over Lexi's vision for the dress. She wanted drama. She wanted glamour. She wanted something that would make the judges weep. She showed me a dozen reference photos, all from designers whose assistants made more in a month than I'd made in the past year. Emerald green, definitely, she said. It brings out my eyes. Beading on the bodice, Mom added. Lots of sparkle, and the skirt needs to move beautifully, like flowing and romantic, but also structured enough to photograph well. I wrote it all down, nodding in all the right places, asking all the right questions, playing the part of the devoted sister, the reliable seamstress, the family workhorse. When they finally left, Lexi gave me an air kiss near my cheek. You're the best, Harper. I don't know what I'd do without you. Mom squeezed my hand. "This is going to be wonderful. I just know it." The door closed, the bell chimed, and I stood in the middle of my studio, surrounded by fabric and thread and the ghosts of every dream I'd deferred, feeling nothing at all. Then I pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over the text app, but typing felt too passive for the rage vibrating under my skin. I needed to hear a human voice. I hit the speed dial for O'Brien. O'Brien Mitchell had been my best friend for years. We'd met through a community for textile and fashion enthusiasts, a collective of fabric geeks who cared more about fiber content than current trends. I'd posted a complex question about the structural integrity of bias-cut silk, and O'Brien was the only one who replied with a detailed engineering analysis rather than a guess. We'd decided to meet for coffee to continue the debate, stayed until the shop closed, arguing about weave patterns, and had been inseparable ever since. Most people thought we were dating. We'd never been anything but friends, but we had that rare kind of friendship that felt like family. The kind you choose, not the kind you're stuck with. O'Brien was brilliant, genuinely, objectively brilliant. He worked for a major sportswear corporation now, doing research and development on performance fabrics. He'd tried many times over the years to get me to apply for positions at his company. "You're better than this," he'd say, gesturing at my cramped studio. "You should be designing for real brands, Harper. You have the talent." But I'd always been too afraid, too convinced I wasn't good enough. What an idiot I'd been. He picked up on the second ring. "Harper, everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice shaking. "No, O'Brien, it's not." And then I told him everything. I paced the length of my tiny studio, clutching the phone like a lifeline, and poured it all out. The demand for the dress, the anonymous French designer scheme, and the conversation I'd overheard on the stairs. When I got to the part about my mother calling me a failure, my voice cracked. There was a long silence on the other end. Then O'Brien's voice came through, low and dangerous. That failure comment. Harper, you know that's garbage, right? You're one of the most talented designers I've ever met." "Doesn't matter," I said, wiping a tear from my cheek with the back of my hand. "What matters is that I've been an idiot for 11 years, and I'm done. Done." "How?" I stopped pacing and looked at the dress form standing in the corner. I'm going to make the dress. I'm going to make it perfect. And I'm going to make sure my sister never forgets the favor I did her. I want to create something so beautiful that when it all falls apart, no one can say, I didn't give it my absolute best." "Falls apart," O'Brien repeated slowly. "Literally, ideally." I could practically hear his engineer's brain shifting gears, the click and whir of calculation replacing his anger. After a moment, he spoke again, his tone sharp with a new idea. "I might have something that could help," he said. "What is it?" "Better if I show you. I need a week." "A week?" "Trust me, Harper. It'll be worth the wait. Meet me next Saturday, the usual place." "I'll be there," I said. The following Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I met O'Brien at our favorite cafe, a tiny place called Brewed Awakening that served genuinely good coffee and made the best blueberry scones in the state. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at our usual corner table with 2 large coffees and a scone he'd split in half. O'Brien was the kind of handsome that snuck up on you, not flashy like the guys Lexi dated, but solid and real, with warm brown eyes and the kind of steady presence that made you feel safe. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting, pushing a coffee toward me. "Thanks, you're a real charmer." I took a long sip of the hot coffee, letting the caffeine settle my nerves. "So, do you have it?" O'Brien reached into his bag and set a small package wrapped in plain paper on the table between us. He unwrapped it to reveal a small spool of thread preserved in an airtight container. To the untrained eye, it looked like standard polyester, the kind you could grab at any Joann Fabrics for $3, but I knew O'Brien better than that. "This," he said, his voice low and intense, "is high-sensitivity soluble thread. This isn't experimental and it's not magic," he explained, tapping the spool with his index finger. "It's just incredibly obscure. It's a specific type of industrial, vanishing basting thread." I leaned forward, studying the innocent-looking spool. "Soluble, like dissolving in water?" O'Brien's grin widened, sharp and knowing. That's the beauty of it. It just needs a microclimate of high heat and moisture to destabilize the polymer chain. Like, say, the environment created between a tight corset and a nervous, sweating body under 4,000 watts of stage lighting. I stared at the spool, my mind racing as the chemistry clicked into place. It won't break immediately, he added. It needs time to soften. Under stage conditions, with the heat trapped against her skin, I'd estimate the degradation would start within a minute or two. Full structural failure in 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the stress load, and it's safe. It won't hurt her skin. It's basically just a specialized plastic, completely non-toxic. The worst that happens is it turns a little gummy before it gives up the ghost. He pushed the spool toward me across the scarred wooden table. It's a legitimate product, Harper, just applied creatively. The question is, are you sure you want to do this? I picked up the spool, feeling the weight of it in my palm. It looked so innocent, so ordinary, just a tool of the trade, repurposed for justice. But as I sat there, I remembered my mother's voice. That failure. I remembered Lexi's laugh. I remembered 11 years of sacrificed dreams and stolen futures. I'm sure, I said. O'Brien nodded slowly, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. Then let's make your sister shine. To add a layer of realism, I recalled from online fashion forums that soluble threads like this are often used in temporary garment construction for prototypes, dissolving in water or heat to allow easy disassembly without damaging fabrics. O'Brien's twist on using body heat and sweat was ingenious, turning a niche tool into a weapon of precise revenge. It reminded me of those viral stories about sabotaged wedding dresses or pageant mishaps that make headlines, like the 2018 Miss America wardrobe malfunction that sparked memes for weeks. This would be bigger, more calculated. The first night after O'Brien handed me that spool, I didn't sleep. I sat at my drafting table under the harsh fluorescent light, sketching and resketching until my hand cramped and my vision blurred. This dress wouldn't just be beautiful, it would be my magnum opus, both literally and figuratively. Every line I drew was deliberate, every bead placement calculated, every seam a potential point of catastrophic failure. I lost track of time, days bled into nights. I survived on black coffee and the kind of manic energy that comes from finally having a plan. My small studio became a war room, fabric samples and thread spools scattered across every surface like ammunition. Of course, Deborah couldn't leave me alone. She started showing up unannounced, sometimes twice a day, always with that saccharine smile plastered across her face. Just checking in on my talented daughter, she'd coo before immediately launching into criticisms disguised as suggestions. Don't you think it needs more sparkle, Harper? Lexi needs to shine brighter than everyone else. The train looks a bit ordinary. Can you make it more grand, more dramatic? Each visit, each demand, each thinly veiled insult, they all fed the fire burning in my chest. What Deborah didn't realize was that she was accelerating the process of her own daughter's downfall. Every upgrade she requested meant more weight, more stress points, more opportunities for the soluble thread to do its work. I smiled through it all, a calm, serene smile that must have unsettled her, though she was too self-absorbed to notice. Of course, Mom. Whatever Lexi needs, you're right. More crystals would be stunning. I'll redesign the train tonight. I was no longer the anxious, eager-to-please daughter she'd manipulated for years. I was a hunter setting a trap, and my prey was walking straight into it. After 1 week of constant revisions, we finalized the last sketch. I held it up to the light, pretending to admire it with maternal pride, while internally cataloging every expensive detail I deliberately incorporated: hand-beaded bodice, imported French lace, Swarovski crystals cascading down the skirt, a 6-foot train with hand-embroidered flowers that would require hundreds of hours to complete. It was obscenely extravagant. It was going to cost a fortune. Perfect. It's beautiful, Deborah breathed, actually tearing up. Lexi is going to look like a princess. She deserves nothing less, I said, and meant every word, just not in the way my mother thought. To sell the illusion completely, I did something that should have been unthinkable. I withdrew my entire savings account. Every penny I'd scraped together, every dollar I'd set aside to pay next month's studio rent, gone. I marched into the most expensive fabric store in the city and bought the finest imported silks, the most delicate lace, the highest quality, everything. When I showed Deborah the receipts, her eyes went wide. "Harper, this is too much. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I interrupted, meeting her gaze steadily. "She's my sister. I'm all in for Lexi." The words tasted like ash, but they had the desired effect. Deborah's suspicion melted into approval. She actually hugged me, a rare occurrence that made my skin crawl. "You're a good daughter, Harper, a good sister." I returned the embrace, thinking about my stolen college fund. 11 years of being the good daughter, while they took and took and took. Not anymore. Back in my studio, I laid out all the materials like a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. The emerald green silk gleamed under my work lights, the crystals caught the light and threw rainbow fractals across my walls. Everything was exquisite, everything was expensive, everything was going to unravel. I got to work. My hands moved with the confidence of 15 years of experience. I'd been sewing since I was 15, had studied fashion design obsessively, even without formal education. Every technique I'd taught myself, every skill I'd honed in this cramped little studio, it all came together now. The bodice took shape first. I constructed it with architectural precision, creating a structured foundation that would support hundreds of crystals. But here's where my specialized knowledge came into play. At critical stress points, the shoulder seams, the side panels, the places where weight and movement would create maximum tension, I alternated between normal thread and O'Brien's special soluble thread. Not obviously, nothing that would show up in a casual inspection or even a careful try-on. The soluble thread was nearly identical in appearance to standard polyester, but it had one crucial difference. It was designed to break down when exposed to sustained heat and moisture, human body heat, sweat, stage lights, and then, at the worst possible moment, everything would give way. I worked 18-hour days. My fingers ached, my eyes burned. I survived on takeout and coffee. The skirt came together next. Layers of emerald silk that transitioned into a breathtaking white-blue ombre effect. I hand-embroidered delicate flowers that seemed to float across the fabric. Each stitch was perfect, and woven throughout, invisible and deadly, was O'Brien's gift. To heighten the drama, I incorporated subtle elements inspired by recent fashion trends I'd seen on Vogue's website, like asymmetrical draping that would catch the light in unexpected ways, ensuring the dress looked even more avant-garde before its inevitable collapse. 1 month later, I stepped back from my work table and stared at what I'd created. It was breathtaking. The emerald green gown shimmered like gemstones. The bodice was a masterpiece of beadwork, each crystal positioned to catch light from every angle. The skirt flowed like water, the ombre effect creating an ethereal, almost magical quality. The train was a work of art, 6 feet of hand-embroidered lace that seemed to glow. I'd poured every ounce of my skill into this dress. It was, without exaggeration, the most beautiful thing I'd ever made. It was also a ticking time bomb. I called Deborah. "It's ready." They came within the hour. The moment Lexi saw the dress hanging on my dress form, she actually gasped, "Harper! Oh my gosh, Harper! It's incredible." For a moment, just a brief, traitorous moment, I felt a flicker of pride, not for Lexi, but for my own work. I'd created something extraordinary. Then Lexi tried it on, and that flicker died. She preened in front of my full-length mirror, turning this way and that, completely absorbed in her own reflection. Not once did she thank me. Not once did she acknowledge the month of sleepless nights, the drained savings account, the skill required to create something this complex. "It's perfect," Deborah declared, misty-eyed. "You've outdone yourself, Harper, and I need you backstage on pageant night to help Lexi into the dress. It's so intricate, and we can't trust anyone else with it." Even if my mother hadn't asked, I would have found an excuse. to serve as Lexi's wardrobe assistant that day. That was the critical moment. I needed to be the one to dress her, to ensure that every seam sat exactly as intended, that nothing was disturbed or detected before she walked onto that stage. I met her eyes and smiled. Of course, Mom. I wouldn't miss it for the world. After they left, I slumped in my chair and stared at my empty bank account on my phone screen. I was broke. Completely, utterly broke. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and I had nothing. My phone buzzed, a text from O'Brien. "How's the masterpiece coming?" "It's done," I typed back. "Everything changes. That's my girl. The wolf is ready to hunt." I looked at the dress. In the dim light of my studio, the emerald silk seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Yes, the wolf was ready, and the lamb had no idea what was coming.